Welcome to My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 263. We're literally in the week that leads right into Shavuos. This coming Shabbos will be Parshas Bamidbar, and going straight from Parshas Bamidbar into Sunday, Monday, the 2 days of Shavuos. So let us begin, as we always do, with something significantly connected to this period in time. So what's the connection between Bamidbar and Shavuos? It's pretty obvious. Is the fourth book of the Torah begins Bamidbar Sinai, and of course Bamidbar Sinai was Har Sinai. Mount Sinai with Mattan Torah was what happened, and the Torah was given to the Eden. This historical event took place in the Sinai desert. So of course the question is asked, why of all places did Hashem choose to give the Torah in a desert? If you were to give someone a special gift, a very special gift, where would you choose a location? You would go to a beautiful ambiance, comfortable, and present the gift. There are many cities Hashem could have chosen, starting from Yerushalayim, not in Israel, there are other cities. Here he took them into an arid Midbar Shmama, an arid desert, Eretz Tziya v'Oyev, a place that has no water. It's not a place of civilization. Lo Yoshev Adam Sham, it's not a place where human beings dwell. Nochash Sora v'Akriv, as the Pasuk says, there's snakes and scorpions, it's dangerous even. And that's where he gave them what? Chem de Gnuza, the concealed, the hidden treasure. The greatest treasure ever given to the human race was Torah. And where did he give it? He chose the Midbar Sinai. So the Medrash gives different reasons for it. One very basic and beautiful reason, because the Eibishter wanted to make sure that nobody lays claim to the Torah. Someone will say, if you give it to a certain city, the people living in that city will say, hey, you have to pay us royalties every time you learn Torah. He gave it in a no man's land, in language of halacha, mokem hefker. You lose something in the wilderness, nobody says it's mine because it's not their property. It's not a place where people live. So he gave the Torah dafke, specifically in a place that everybody has access to it forever and ever. In another place it says, why in a midbar? Because we have to be like a midbar when we receive the Torah. We have to empty ourselves and not be filled with our own civilized and sophisticated tools, but to be empty like a midbar. In Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe says, Lo Yoshev Adam Sham can be interpreted two ways. It can be a place that human beings don't dwell because it's beneath human civilization, or it could be because it's beyond human civilization. It transcends Adam. And as such, it offers a ability to reach places that are beyond the structure. And one is rooted in the other. So there's a midbar which is a negative midbar, a midbar ra. You're saying the umazah, midbar of the umazah, and the negative, which is referring to a place that's below civilization. And then there's a place, a midbar, lo yoshev adam, it's higher than. It doesn't have any shape and form as a structured city would have. And that's what happened when Mattan Torah took place. It wasn't just the giving of a book, even of a mandate, but of a blueprint for life, a blueprint of existence. The Torah is God's blueprint. Alpayim shana kadmu Torah leil, and the Torah precedes existence because it's the blueprint. And chachmoshe shel Kadosh Baruch Hu, it's where God invests and infuses his whole personality, so to speak, in the Torah. What's the first word of the Ten Commandments said by Mattan Torah? Anoichi, Hashem Elokecha Anoichi. The Gemara in Shabbos says, is an acronym. Anon nafshi ksovis Yehovis. I have infused, instilled, transcribed my soul in these words. So the Torah captures the divine soul and the divine spirit. And that is beyond human structures. And that's why it's given in a midbar. And when we go beyond our structure and out of our comfort zones and our structured identities, we become a keli. Nafshi kofel hakel tiyeh, psach libi b'seidasecha. my spirit, is ka'afar lakol tiyeh, meaning it's like dust before everybody. It's not defined with all kinds of sophistication, and that opens you up. Psach libi, open my heart. So the lesson of this is a very powerful lesson, because when you really want truth, it's not about you. It's about a higher truth. And to receive a higher truth, you have to absorb it, you have to divest yourself. You have to free yourself, strip yourself, suspend all your sophistication, all your tools to receive something greater than you are. And that's the key element of Mattan Torah, and that's why Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. So the question is asked, Moshe Kibel Torah Hashem. Moshe received the Torah from God, not from Sinai. He received it on Sinai. But Sinai, he learned from Sinai. He received the Torah in the way Sinai was. It was a mountain, but it was the smallest mountain of all mountains. So you have to feel proud. Vayigba, libay, b'darkei Hashem. A certain proud. You're not a skupa nidreses, which means a doormat. There's a pride, there's a confidence. But it's the lowest. Mochich mochol terayu. The shortest, the lowest of all mountains. And Moshe learned from Sinai that on one hand you have to have that intensity, that confidence, but you have to also know you're the smallest. Because you're an unav, you're humble, and therefore you become a container to channel the greatest. You have to be like a midbar, and like offer, that everybody steps on it, but not steps in a way that you allow yourself to be in any way demoralized, but rather that you don't take yourself that seriously, and you suspend yourself. Chochmah, in Atzilus, is bittel, koyach ma. It allows itself to absorb and to experience something greater than itself. Bina says, which is a yesh in seichel itself, I understand. Chochmah says, the idea is being understood. Chochmah says, I grasp, the idea grasps me. Bina says, I grasp the idea. And Chassidus elaborates at length on the difference between the two. And that's the attitude that we take as we count down the last days of the counting of the Omer, which leads us to 49 days into the 50th day. That's given from above. That's not something you can achieve directly. But when you build you can't have 50 without 49. So the 49, we make our effort is the keli. We refine ourselves, all the midas, from chesed shebechesed through malchus shav malchus. And then you become this receptacle, container to channel the 50th, the Shad Hanun, the 50th gate of Bina, which connects to Chachma, as Chassidus and Kabbalah explain. So that's one of the lessons from Shavuos and from Bamidbar, being that next week there will not be a program because it's Yom Tov. So see this as a pre-Shavuos discussion, but above all, Chassidus applied of how we empty ourselves in order to receive something far, far greater. A full cup cannot be filled. That's the yesod on the foundation of whole Mattan Torah, Nasa v'nishma, and therefore they can receive the greatest. So the emptier you are, the more you receive. Okay, with that, let me just refer you to other episodes where I've spoken about this. Shavuos Bamidbar, episode 68, 118, 164, and 213. And this is a good opportunity to announce the new website, which I've already mentioned a few times, ChassidusApply.com, completely dedicated to these episodes, to these topics, to the archives of previous episodes, to a place where you can ask your questions, and many, many more resources. Check it out, including, of course, the essays. This year and the previous year's essays in the annual My Life Chassidus Applied essay contest. And that's where you can find these episodes. When you go to the YouTube version, you'll see the timestamp, so you can actually go to the exact space, the exact topic, the exact time where that topic is being talked about. Okay, so a question came in, which of course connects to Shavuos. Why do we eat dairy on Shavuos? So there's the custom to have a dairy meal. Some have the dairy meal and then an hour or an hour and a half later, based on different minhagim and halachas of separating between dairy and meat. Obviously, the other way around, it's 6 hours. But from dairy to meat, so they have another meal. A different custom. Some people eat only the dairy meal, one meal. So the question, of course, is why? Hello. What is the reason why we eat milk on Shavuos according to the Rebbe? I heard many reasons, and I also heard the Rebbe said it's not because the Jewish people didn't have kosher pots. when they received the Torah, because Hashem would not give them a Torah that tells them to eat meat on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and they wouldn't be able to fulfill it. Is that true? Also, what can we learn from milk versus meat in serving Hashem? I look forward to sharing what you have to say with my family and community. Thanks. P.S. If you can quote sources, that would be great. Okay. So firstly, let's just put things into context. Always make things, it's very important to be precise. What did the Rebbe say? The reason, according to the Rebbe is a Torah person. And that means whatever he says comes from Torah. The Rebbe did not, God forbid, innovate the custom of eating dairy on Shavuos. It's brought in Sfarim, goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, if not longer, to the point that many say that it was during Mattan Torah that they eaten, the first meal they ate after Mattan Torah was dairy. We'll soon discuss. So this is not according to the Rebbe. It's according to Chazal. And the Rebbe cites it and discusses and does analyze it. It was the year Tov Lamed Vov, Pasha Nosei, the Shabbos after Shavuos, where the Rebbe actually spoke about it at length, and it's already printed today in Chelik Yud Ches, in the Sicha Matis Maseh. Because there it talks about Hagolas Kalim, meaning koshering container Kalim vessels, when they're either new vessels or vessels that were purchased or were before not kosher ones. So he talks about that in Chelik Yud Ches. So there's a maamorim source, and there cites several other sources regarding this topic of eating dairy. Generally speaking, there are many, many places. You go to Taimam and Hagim, I think there's 30, 40 reasons if I recall. Maybe less, but it's a large number. The four main reasons given usually are cited is number one, because there's a special korban brought on Shavuos called Shtei HaLechem, meaning 2 loaves, some double loaf. So double loaf, like we know, like Shabbos, the loaves of bread correspond to the meals. The 2 loaves that were given on Shabbos, Friday and Shabbos, Lechem Mishnah, that's a pasuk in B'Shalach, a double portion. That's why that was given from the Lechem in Hashemayim, the man, the bread from heaven. That's why we have 2 meals. The third meal is another reason, also connecting to the man, but it's another discussion. So the Shtei HaLechem, Shavuos, corresponding to that, we have 2 meals, specifically 2 meals, 1 dairy, 1 meat. According to that reason, it doesn't explain why it's dairy. It just says 2 meals. There's a second reason given, and this is probably the most popular one, that because the Eden, before Mattan Torah, were in the gather of non-Jews, that's why Mattan Torah was a giyur. It was a conversion in every possible halachic way. As a matter of fact, most of the laws of conversion that we learn today, when a human being wants to convert from non-Jew to Jew, is derived from the laws and the events that happen around Mattan Torah. The 3 things, Kabbalah's mitzvahs, tefillah, and bris milah. Tefillah meaning tefillah with a beis, immersion in a mikveh. So therefore, the vessels that they had the day before Mattan Torah, right up to Mattan Torah, according to halacha, is not kosher, because they were not necessarily, they didn't need kosher vessels, even if they fulfilled some of the laws, which we'll mention in a moment. Nevertheless, it needed to go through a tefillah, a immersion. You have to be tevel the kelim, agolas kelim, all the different rules necessary. So therefore, the first meal after Mattan Torah, what would they eat? So they ate dairy. The Rebbe in that Sikha I cited asked the question, and dairy doesn't need vessels. The dairy also needs kosher vessels. But dairy is not dependent on shchita. Shchita was not done beforehand, and therefore meat was not kosher meat. Dairy is not dependent on slaughtering. The fact, what about dairy and meat? So the Rebbe says, the Rebbe's Chiddush, the Rebbe says, Yashleimer can say that they would not have eaten meat and milk beforehand because the Jews did fulfill many of the laws beforehand. The law of shchita, even if they fulfilled it, but still it's a shchita not of a Jewish shchita. It still begs the question, why did God set it up, like you write, why God set it up in that way, that they should have that situation. So you have to say there must be something about dairy. Comes reason number 3, that dairy and cholov, teres compared to cholov. And there's gematris and so on. So we know that there's cholov and dvash, there's bread, there's milk and honey. And we know there's other levels we call shemen and yayin, oil and wine. But one expression that's used a number of places, that teres compared to cholov. Just like milk from the youngest age sustains a child, it's mother's milk. So Torah is the sustenance of Eden. And that's why, to commemorate that, we eat cholov. And finally, the fourth reason given is to distinguish us from the angels. It's a shvach. The angels, of course, complain to Hashem, why are you giving the Torah to the Eden? It's a chem de gnuza, give it to us. There's a whole sikh, another beautiful sikh from the Rebbe Shavuos sikh, also in volume 18, in Kutei Sichos, the bar metzra, the din of bar metzra. Angels were in heaven. The Torah was coming from heaven. When a property is being sold, the first person who has priority choice, the first choice of rejection is the neighbor. The Malachim had a very good taina. We're neighbors. We're in heaven. So why are you giving to the Jews who are down on earth? A beautiful sikha from Tafshin Chai, Tafshin Yutas, I think, one of the two. The Rebbe explains it. So the angels came with a complaint. Why are you giving Chem de Gnuza to the inferior human beings? It's a whole story in Gemara and Shabbos. How Hashem tells Moshe, you go respond. But one of the ways to demonstrate, Moshe says that let's open the Torah. He was a good advocate, holding on to the throne of God. He says, let's look in the Torah. What does it say there? I am the God that took you out of Egypt. Were you ever in Egypt? He asked the angels. It says, honor your parents. Do you have parents? Do not murder. Do not steal. Do you have even a temptation to do so? So the Torah was given for us. And one of the things that says is that when the Malachim, when they visited Avram Avinu, they ate basar v'cholov. They ate meat and milk mixed together. He served them. Chadl with chema, but butter and tongue. And his question is how he could have done it, but that's not relevant right here. So one of the things we eat dairy is to show the shvachim shel Yisrael, that they always stuck to dairy. They do not mix dairy and meat. But as I said, all these reasons are technical reasons and legitimate ones. There must be something deeper. And the answer is in the reason I mentioned Torah is compared to cholov. Chassidus Kabbalah explains cholov and basar. Why don't you mix the two? Cholov comes from an animal. The reason is because cholov is chesed and meat is gevura. A fascinating rishima from the Rebbe's father on this. The Rebbe explained it a number of times, where you see that sometimes you do mix chesed and gevura. Teferes. Klayim, we don't mix, but the big day kahuna had klayim, linen and wool. Same thing with the klei soda, klei kerem, meaning that you don't mix certain species, because chesed and gevura should not be, it's mavalba the yetzers. In the words of the Bechai and other commentaries, there's a structure God created, and when you mix chesed and gevura not in the right way, you're being mavalba, you're disturbing the whole structure. So Torah, of course, has both chesed and gevura. Eish das lomei. It's a fire. The Torah is a fire compared to eish, but it's also compared to chesed, like water, mayim, and also to cholov, which flows like water. When Mattan Torah happened, it was a joining of both. There was fire and there was cholov. But the focus always has to be Yemin Mekareves V'Smel Decha. The prominent and dominant gene, so to speak, the dominant force should be chesed. So even though Torah has fire and the Torah has gevura and has laws that prohibit things, but above all, the cholov, sustenance, the flow. Eretz Zov is cholov. And cholov therefore represents the chesed of Torah, like he says in Tanya, brought from Medrash, from Gemara and Medrash, that Torah is compared to Mayim, just as Mayim yerdim, or Mayla lamata. Mayim descends from the top down and fills every crevice. So the same thing, Torah comes from heaven, down all the way down and fills every part of our lives. And therefore, symbolic of that is eating a dairy meal, usually on Yom Tov for Shabbos, eat a meat meal. The focus not on gevura but on chesed. Okay. Good. Let's move on to the next question. The next question is, now that most of the world's Jews live in Israel, should the focus shift from a diaspora-centric Judaism to an Israel-centric Judaism? Esteemed Mashpia Rabbi Jacobson. Now that the majority of the world's Jews live in Israel, it seems to me that the dynamic has shifted from a Bavel-centric Judaism to an Israel-centric Judaism. Meaning, of course, when most Jews lived outside of Eretz Yisrael, which is after Churban Bayis Sheni, even after Churban Bayis Rishon, but many went back to the Eretz Yisrael, Israel, for the second temple, but afterwards we were expelled and exiled. So of course life was built, was built around building strong Jewish communities wherever Jews would go. But now, first time in history, in the last few years actually, where the majority and bulk of the population, of the Jewish population, is in Israel. So the question, of course, is, does it shift anything? Let's say, even the rabbinic halachic world now seems to take its cue from Israeli rabbanim more than ever, and the previous hub of halachic decision in New York seems to be taking the position of second fiddle. If I'm not mistaken, there are even halachas that govern what to do in times when the majority of the world's Jews live in Israel. What is the Chabad approach to this changing dynamic? At what point does it make sense for non-official shluchim to start thinking of moving to Israel? So this needs to be clarified in a number of ways. First of all, even when all the Eden, there was always some remnant of Eden in Eretz Yisrael, just for the record, but even when almost all were gone, or not living there, in the physical sense, not only in the spiritual sense, even then we always davened towards Eretz Yisrael. We never forgot Israel. To say that it became diaspora-centric or Bavel-centric, we'll talk about that in a moment. But we always daven towards Israel. That never changed. Because then we say Shuv L'Tzion, Shivas Tzion, and Ikabet Nitchei Yisrael. Our hope was to return to Zion, to return to Eretz Yisrael. That never left us. Not once did it leave us. Our prayers are filled with the message. So that's the most important thing to say, that we always remained Israel-centric. It always remained the center, the place where tefillas elevate. When we make Kiddush Levana, and we announce the Moiled Levana, we don't announce the new year, the new moon, based on wherever we are. It's based on where Eretz Yisrael is the new moon. And so many other examples that keep us focused on Eretz Yisrael being the center of the Jewish universe. In many ways, the entire universe. Zeh Ashar LaHashem. Zeh Ashar HaShamayim. This is the gate to heaven, as Yaakov Avinu said when he fell asleep in Har Moriah. So besides the aspiration, we actually do physical things toward that. Now, of course, Hashem decides when a Jew can and cannot go, especially many years over the Golus. Nishmitun Zerotz, not with our will did we leave, and not with our will we return. God runs the show and leads the footsteps of a human being. So I wanted to first state that. Now, obviously, when Jews moved, wherever they moved, it became the center of their lives physically. That's where they built a Beis Medrash and a Beis Knesset. Beis Rabbeinu Sheba Bovel is basically referring to the Beis Rabbeinu Sheba Bovel, because that became the center focal point where the Jews went to learn by Rebbe. And the same thing in each city, respective city. But still, that never took away from the focus of Eretz Yisrael. You could say in Golas that replaced to some extent, so we should have a vibrant place of Yiddishkeit. With a hope, as the Gemara says in Megillah at the end, Asida, but the Knesiyas, all the Beis Medrash, and all the Bate Knesiyas will return, all the Bate Midrashim will return to Eretz Yisrael. So now, in language of Chassidus, we build a Migdash Ma'at, a mini sanctuary, a Magdo Eretz Yisrael. You take that Kedusha and try to make in each place in the world, transform it from the bottom up, with a goal that will all lead us back to Eretz Yisrael, and Asid Eretz Yisrael shetespasha b'chol harotzes, and Israel will in the future spread to all the lands, and Sid Yerushalayim will spread to all of Israel. So the Kedusha of Israel always remains higher, even when we transform the world. And then there's Esek Kedushas, the 10 levels of holiness in Israel, in Yerushalayim, the old city, all the way to the Harabais, in the Beis HaMikdash, all the way to Kodesh Kadosh. So essentially you can say the process is what? We are charged to turn every corner of this earth into a holy place. But still, Israel has its unique elements in Halacha as well, Trumas and Maisus, things that are only applicable there. And things are only applicable when all the Eden will return there. Or some say Reiv, Minyan, Gabi Yevel and other things. When Mashiach comes, and we'll gather all the Eden back to Israel. As I'm not going to go into now where we stand halachically regarding the fact that most of the Jews are there. But remember, it's still Golus. And Mepnei Galinu, B'plei Chatenu Galinu Matzenu refers also to the Jews in Israel. They also say that. Because it's not just geographic, as I mentioned, it's also spiritual. You can be there and not be there. Not be on that level. So, yes, our attitude is Israel stands the center of the Rebbe, who never went to Eretz Yisrael. But you look at the Sikhs, talked always about Israel. His whole heart and mind was there. He knew about it. And many of the campaigns that Rebbe initiated were all around Eretz Yisrael and the wars, the attacks, and of course the positive things. And yet there comes a time, like a Moshe Rabbeinu didn't go into Eretz Yisrael, there comes a time when he'll go. As far as making Aliyah, people going there, that's already an individual decision. As the Rebbe's approach was generally, if you were dependent upon in a Moshe, an organization outside of Israel, you can't just let go of your responsibility. If, however, you're not, then maybe there is an option. That has to be discussed with your mashpia, with your rov, case by case. We see some of the greatest Eden throughout history, the Gdei Yisrael, that made their way to Eretz Yisrael, the end of their lives. The end. Because they had their shlichus, the Ramban, Shalom, and many others, including, of course, the Arizal, and the people who lived in Tzfas during that time. So I think that answers the question. As far as Chabad approach, as I just said, the Rebbe's approach is if you have a shlichus, you have to do your shlichus. And your shlichus is not disconnected. It's not instead of Eretz Yisrael. Machdo Eretz Yisrael, as the Tzemach Tzedek told us, Chassid. Make this place where you are, as much as possible, make it into a holy and sacred place. That's your shlichus. As far as I said, case by case, every person in their given situation. But we don't have the authority to go ahead and make a movement. Everybody should move to Eretz Yisrael. First of all, everybody has to figure that out on their own. In general, as I said, that's what we're all hoping for. We cannot wait. The day comes, Mashiach comes, and we will all immediately go to Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Next question. Yetzer Tov. From my limited knowledge of Chazal and Chassidus, I noticed that the yetzer hara gets a lot of airtime. We learn many stories and parables about the yetzer hara, the evil inclination, but seemingly none of these things about the yetzer tov, the good inclination. Why is this? Am I missing these sources? If so, why are they not quote unquote popular or well known? If not, why do we know so little about the yetzer tov? So honestly, I'm not sure whether you're correct. It could be that, yes, you were more focused or it was more told to you. But the Torah speaks about both. And many places does compare the two. Above all, since we're talking Chassidus applied, open up a Tanya. Does he speak more about the yetzer hara or more about the yetzer tov? In the language, the nefesh bamis or the nefesh kis? I didn't count the pages, but I would say both get a lot of airtime, so to speak, quote unquote. So the truth is, they're both talked about. It could be more in the shit of Musar and more in the negative fear-based education. We're told more about the yetzer hara, and you have to prevent and the punishments and the deterrence. Whereas Chassidus talks about how great the person is. The chelik elik hamemam mamish, your neshama. To look at gadlus hakel, not just shiftless adam, not just the lowliness of a person. So it could be the yetzer tov is more, I would say, dramatic and more colorful, because we talk about all its the evil temptation and all how it tries to seduce us and so on. Nefesh kis may not be as hip, as fashionable, so to speak. I mean that obviously sarcastically, and it's like a little more boring. But in truth, the nefesh kis, the yetzer tov. By the way, the yetzer tov is the midas of the nefesh kis. Yetzer hara is the midas of the nefesh habamis. So nefesh is all 10 faculties, as we learn in Tanya. The intellectual faculties and the emotional ones. Even in animals, so there's intellectual faculties. They're controlled by your impulses and instincts. So that's just as an aside. And it's talked about, as a matter of fact, the Taka starts with the first nefesh habamis, because that enters first to give a fighting chance. But then nefesh Hashem is b'Yisrael, Perik Beis. And it goes on and on, talk about both of them. And that there's a battle. So I wouldn't necessarily categorize one more than the other. It could be some of us seem to pay more attention or feel there's more about the yetzer hara, or maybe it is talked about more in schools and so on. But based on Tanya and based on so many places of Chassidus, we should be teaching our children about the nefesh elokis, how great they can become, the potential, the divine potential that each person has. And that is the best incentive. The best defense is offense. At times, you do have to speak, and you speak about the yetzer hara. But I would not say that it necessarily should get more airtime and more focus. Now, in given situations, case by case, obviously you look at each case, different people, where their matzav is, where their status is, and what they need to be able to grow. Okay. Next question. Sensitivity to others. Should we be more sensitive to older singles when we bless them to find a shidduch? Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. My question for you today is as follows. Do you think the minhag custom to wish older singles by simchas, weddings, l'chaims, etc., in mitzvah Hashem badir, meaning with God's help by you, loosely translated, God willing, soon by you, do you think this custom should be discontinued? Here is why I think this custom should be discontinued. Firstly, many older singles don't go to weddings, l'chaims anymore. They attend simchas only of close friends and immediate family. I should really speak only for myself, but I think this can be true for others as well. I also understand where the well-wishers are coming from. Their intention is not to hurt the recipient of their blessing. Rather, since Jews are geimlei chasodim, meaning kind and compassionate, giving, naturally inclined to do loving kindness with others, so when they see another Jew hurting, their natural response is to bless them so they shall hurt no more. However, with all the good intentions, these kind of blessings just intensifies the pain of the older single who is trying to enjoy a simcha already with a chip on their shoulder. In conclusion, I would like to share a Torah thought with you and your listeners. I was recently learning chapter 41 of Tehillim, Psalms, where the psalmist opens up with Ashrei Maskil Keil Dol. Praised is the one who puts his mind to the weak. The commentaries explain that the word dol, weak, refers either to the impoverished or to the ill. The commentaries probe further, why does the psalmist use the word maskil? Intellect in correlation with kindness, he should have used words like hanesan leiv ladol, give his heart. Why mind? One who puts his heart to the weak. The commentaries explain further that in order to do kindness with another, it has to be done right. We have to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, so to speak. When we give charity to a poor person, we have to give it wisely so that he shouldn't feel embarrassed. And when we visit the sick, we should convey to them a message of hope and comfort and inquire what their needs are. Basically, to be successful at being kind, you have to use your brains and be in tuned to another. I hope you can discuss these topics at Mashiach now. So firstly, in general topic about singles, we spoke about it in episodes 1499, 120. Regarding sensitivity, absolutely. I am not here going to tell people to make a gzeira, a decree, that you can't tell to someone a mitzvah Shem by you. I don't think that should be done. I do think, however, everyone should stop being robotic and mechanical and start thinking about the other person and maybe give them a blessing in a very discreet and beautiful way that does not hurt someone's feelings, how much you care. So there's no question we should all be more sensitive, especially a person who has that called chip on the shoulder or has a sense that something's the matter, I'm not married yet, and people looking at me and so on. We have to be extra sensitive. So this isn't about just pushing people, it's being careful who you speak to, when you speak, and how you speak. So I couldn't agree more to the sensitivity. At the same time, we don't necessarily have to walk on eggshells. Every person has their challenge, and many people are very open about it. So I don't think we have to do that either. We're not here to hurt. We're not here to exaggerate or patronize. We're here to be honest. And there's nothing wrong to being able to say, yes, I will pick up a phone, I will talk to someone, I'll look around, and so on. Everyone has to make that decision. So thank you for that, and I appreciate it. Okay, next question. Women voting. Okay. According to the Torah, are women permitted to vote? Whenever elections were held in Crown Heights, citing halacha, women were not allowed to vote. Does halacha allow women to vote in governmental elections? Did the Rebbe's wife, Rebbe Mushka, vote? Do those voting have to listen to their parents about who to vote for if their parents have a strong preference? Or does a woman have to listen to her husband's preference? Okay. So, as always, I don't paskin halachas here. This is not a place for psaks. If you want a psak, you go to a rabbi and ask. Generally speaking, however, I'll just state a few things. Generally, the consensus in many communities that women don't vote in a religious community, let's say for a rov, or even for the heads of the community, vadakol, but they go together, couples vote, meaning families vote. That husband and wife vote together. And it could be the wife is the one that is suggesting the vote. The man casts it, and there's reasons for it, besides sneers. There's other reasons. We'll talk about that in a moment. However, what about government elections? So we know women's suffrage, the idea that women voting has been a big battle that many people have fought, and women today are allowed to vote. Once upon a time, they were not allowed. So one could also argue that maybe when they were not allowed in the secular world, it may have been more of a pirza to do it, so the religious world went along. But it's deeper than that. The famous so-called disagreement between the two chief rabbis before Israel became even a state, in the 20s and 30s, between Rav Kook and the Sephardic chief rabbi. There was a big difference of opinion about this matter. And Rav Kook was very adamant, interestingly, though in many ways he's very so-called progressive or more liberal, if you wish. But here he's very adamant that women not only cannot, but should not. Absolutely not. Because we don't give in to the customs of the land. And he goes to a whole discussion about it. We have to stand strong and Toradic. And there's a derech. The other chief rabbi felt otherwise. And this has raged on. Some say things have changed because today there is women's suffrage, women do vote. So maybe it's not considered such a big thing for women to vote. So again, I'm not pasking, I will just bring both sides of it. Some go, of course, into the discussion and argument about shirara, that women should not serve as leaders, as kings. We learn this, the Gemara says it, we learn it from Midrashim and so on. And there's a whole question about the Veda. So some say because shirara, and that's about voting, is about voting for a leader, they shouldn't vote either. But some argue, what's the connection? What's the connection with you voting, with you running for office? So there's many different opinions on the matter. Overall, as I said, I'm not going to paskin on the matter. I will say there are many religious people that do go to governmental elections, whether it's on the local, state, or federal level. I don't know about the Rebbe Chaim Mushka. If someone has any information, please share it. But that's different also when it comes to religious matters. It's a religious community, and then you don't want to make an extra pirza if that is the standard, that people don't vote for many reasons, either because that's how it's always been, whether it's sneas, whether it's shrora, whatever it may reason be. Why should we change it? You know, the idea of just change, the name of change. Now, the fact you'll say why women treated second class, they're not. That's the one, two wrongs don't make a right. Meaning that if a husband treats a wife in that way, he should be reprimanded. That's not how you treat a wife. They are equals, they are equal partners. And in that, a good woman, a good man who have a bittul to each other, she understands. Just like some women change their name, women, the custom is to change their name to the husband's name. Why not the other way around? That's the minhag. Again, different reasons given for it. So a woman who's secure doesn't have a problem. So my husband's the one that's going to cast the ballot. But we spoke about it. We're together on this. The Rebbe says, Ishik Sheda Eser Etzein Baila. Kosher woman, appropriate woman of integrity, Eser Etzein Baila can be read, fulfills her husband's will, as most people interpret. But Eser can also mean creates her husband's will. His husband's ratzon. So it's more complicated than just one-way street. Now, each have their unique roles, and we talked about this in previous episodes. I'm not going to go into that. And God did not create inferior human beings. He gave two roles and gave physiological differences. And that's why women fit to their mishlichus and men to theirs. There's no reason to reverse that. There's no reason to undermine that. And yet that still does not mean that women don't have power. They're leaders in their own right and leaders in their own way, and it's tzniusdik way and halachic way. And as I said, regarding this issue of voting, it comes down to you have to ask your local rabbi, and if you wish, you could ask another one to get your own clarity what you should be doing if you're talking about a woman or a man for that matter. Okay. Next question. Seder Chassidus be'iyun. Let me just pause for a moment. Just to see, these are all questions that came in several months ago, but we're continuously catching up. So do not hesitate to send letters, your questions, at the anonymous forum at chassidusapply.com. We will get to them as I'm getting to these. If for some reason some of these are people who wrote them didn't give up hope, so now you know, don't give up hope on me, and we'll address them all. So next question is about Seder Chassidus be'iyun, which means learning Chassidus in depth. Seder, as a yeshiva bacher, has an orderly structure and when he studies. Should I be learning deeper maamorim Chassidus, and if so, which? Hi, Rabbi Jacobs, Rabbi Simon. Thank you so much for this shiurim. I'm a younger man learning for several years with Hatzlacha. I'm a young man learning for several years with success, but not too much clarity of my purpose here. But not much clarity about his purpose on this world. Mm-hmm. Through your shiurim, through your classes, I now begin to learn Sifrei Chabad, the books of Chabad. I know the Rebbe encouraged to start by Derech Mitzvah with the book Derech Mitzvah on mitzvahs, which I would like to ask about Sifrei. I would like to ask about Sifrei Rashab. Being from outside, it seems less on the personal level than the first Rabbi Svarim like Tanya and Torah. In short, what's the Seder, when to start, and why this Kabbalistic maamorim that described Tzimtzum is such a big part of learning Chassidus beyond Tiskul and Mitzvahs? Okay. So, just referring to cross-referencing to episode 81. Now, regarding the question, in the number of answers I've seen from the Rebbe when people ask this question, is the following. Firstly, when a student asks his teacher, where should he begin learning? Where can be both where geographical location, but which books, which sefer. Torah's many different departments, so to speak. But mokem shali b'chafetz, where your heart desires. So this is a question you have to ask yourself and get your mashpia involved and ask what is something that you gravitate to, where your heart desires. Remember, Torah is a Torah achas. The Rogatchover explains it. Everything is one body. It's one part of God's Torah. So how you enter can be many different ways. Some people enter through Chumash and Rashi. Some people enter through Halacha. Some through Agadata. Some through Primus Torah. The list goes on. Some through Talmud, Halacha, so on. They all are going to the same one Torah. So you have to ask yourself what you gravitate to, what speaks to you. That's number one. That's in general a rule as far as what how a person should begin learning. Especially if you're describing not having purpose, then for sure you need to be learning exactly that. The Chassidus that talks about finding purpose. A good place to begin, if you read English, is Torah Meaningful Life, my book, where I talk about that. And that leads, of course, into deeper understanding and deeper study of Chassidus. As far as Sifrei Chabad beyond that, so the Rebbe did offer to suggest to many people to start with Derech Mitzvah, which are the simpler mitzvahs, easier mitzvahs to explain, mitzvahs tzitzis, Masar and Bekosov, Binyan Migdash. There's a few basics. But we also know from the Rebbe about learning some certain chapters in Tanya, and also other maamorim from the Rebbe Rashab, or sometimes the Frierdiker Rebbe. And again, there's no rule. If it's too deep, some people love it, and it challenges them. If it's too light, it may be too close to you. So you have to really figure out what works for you. So I don't have a black and white answer. I think it has to be determined on more factors than I can read into this. And this, I suggest talking to people who are closer to you, but I don't decline. If you feel that you want to discuss it with me or some way send me an email, please do so. I'll be happy to assist. So of course the Sfifri Yisaidim are Tanya, Tere'er, Lukut Tere'er. But nevertheless, there's other Svarim, there's maamorim that are easier to understand, even though they may be deeper. In Samach Vov, Ayin Beis, Reb Marashav maamorim. But again, it's case by case, and you must talk to your mashpia, because there's no way, I don't know who you are, to tell you, start telling you, learn this ma'am, that ma'am. What do you gravitate to? What are the things that you're really interested in? The Makom Shli B'Chafetz is big, in my view. Okay. Now with that, we're going to do some follow-up. So last week I started with anti-Semitism. And though, as I said, I didn't necessarily agree with the approach that the writer wrote, but still I found it intriguing enough to address it. And as I said this week, I'm going to take one or two topics and then go through it, plow through it in the next coming weeks. So the discussion was that this fellow, whoever's writing, man or woman, has reached out to non-Jews who spoke anti-Semitic things to try to see, in his words, constructive dialogue online with around 30 anti-Semites, and continue to engage with them in the commute in the morning and other times. So he then compiled, he says, here's a compilation of their complaints and effective ways of addressing the issues, complaints of anti-Semites. But before I go there, I mentioned, and I mention again, that the Rebbe, of course, emphasized the Hilchas Malachim, Seif Perik Ches, from the Rambam, where he talks about mitzvah. It's a mitzvah on every Jew, just like it is to do 613 mitzvahs, to do the mitzvahs that are in Yaakov, to influence, inspire, compel in some way. Of course, it means always in a positive way, the non-Jews to do their mitzvahs, and because it was given at Sinai. So there's very clear a directive from the Rebbe in this regard. And that is the best solution, of course, to any form of anti-Semitism. But yet, since a person wrote, I'm going to read some of his suggestions. And we'll see where it goes. I would like to begin by discussing black anti-Semitism in New York City, followed by white anti-Semitism outside New York City. In my observation, black anti-Semitism in New York City is a result of feeling disrespected and disregarded. One woman who works in a frum office and posts very anti-Semitic comments online told me that when clients come in, they greet the Jewish employees and ignore her as if she doesn't exist. The obvious answer is don't ignore people. Say good morning, good afternoon, or nod with a smile. Not just in offices, but also to neighbors, cashiers, etc. Show respect not by cutting lines, even if you accidentally bump into someone. If you accidentally bump into someone, especially on the team, on the train, say, excuse me. Be considerate and don't let store doors or subway gates slam in the face of the other person behind you. Give it that extra push. If you're a landlord, fulfill all your obligations to your tenants. We must break this vicious cycle, and it has to begin with us. Look for opportunities to make a kiddush. Someone sneezed, offer them a tissue. Say thank you to whom and whenever possible. Last but not least, don't swagger when you're weak. Swaggering inflames anti-Semitism. Even the Nevi'im spoke about this. Walk with a combination of self-respect and bittul. Nevi'im walk with a combination of self-respect and bittul. Don't underestimate the power of all these things have to save lives. The above applies in regard to white Gentiles as well. Okay. I'm going to stop here with this because there's more that he writes, but fine, thank you for that. And of course, I welcome all your comments and rebuttals and questions and so on. I want to say one more thing which I neglected to mention about my Chassidus. When you learn deep maamorim Chassidus, and truth is all Chassidus has depth to it, but souls that are obviously deeper. There's a few things that Chassidim have always said, and Rabbeim as well. There's something about, it's bezachich the chemer. The etzem meaning of learning Torah, especially Primus Torah, refines the crassness, refines the materialism and the selfish nature of every human being. That's number one. When you learn deep things and you exert your mind according to Chassidus, even if you don't fully understand it, it has a very positive impact. But still, you have to be realistic and not be self-delusional. It's important to talk to the people who know you, who've studied with you, so you can push the boundaries. And you'd be surprised. You may be learning something that you think is beginner. Don't be afraid of that word. Sometimes the beginner can be even better than the advanced. I've had this experience a number of times. So don't be disturbed. It's a journey. It's an exhilarating journey, and I hope that everybody finds their powerful path. Okay, let's go now to, where were we? I did we're going to go to another follow-up about the Zohar. So I got quite a number of comments. Yeah. And I want to clarify some things I said, be more precise. So first of all the authorities that we trust declare very clearly that and reject any aspersions thrown on the question who the author of the Zohar is. That even though the Zohar may have evolved and different people wrote different sections, but it's based on Teres of Rashbi, and the people who later saw the manuscripts of the Zohar immediately knew that because they were aware, they were insiders, as we discussed last week at length. And yet we find it's royal controversy, because the story of Moshe de Leon, what did he say, what did he not say? So I wanted to just correct and embellish a little more. I quoted the Shem Agdelim, even though I did not say his name. And what I did was and the Shem Agdelim, let me read inside what he says. Shem Agdelim is from the Chidah. So he is a complete Bar Samcha that we can rely on. And he says the following about the Zohar. Chaim Yosef David Azulai. He says that I saw written from the Rav Avram, Ravingu, not sure, who actually writes the following. That the Reish HaMukabalim in the Rishain, we're talking about now, time of Tanoim, was Rabbi Nechuna ben Akona, who he composed Sefer HaBoyer, and then came Rashbi, who did the Sefer HaZeir, the Chibur Bekamim Mechiburim, and he joined together with different sections. So there was the whole corpus of the Zohar. And here's what happened next. But then when Rashbi passed away, and he says, the same thing in Rabbi Lozer, and the whole generation, they lost Chachmas and Kabbalah. They lost it. Until God led the way, and what happened was there was a king in Malche Mizrach, that means usually an Arab king, from the eastern part of the world, who said they should dig for business purposes. They were digging somewhere, an excavation, and there they found an Aron Echad, a chest, a vault, had in it the Sefer HaZeir, and they sent it to the Malke Edom, to Chachmei Edom, the wise ones from the Western world, Edom, and they didn't know and didn't understand. And then they sent to the Jews in general. And when they saw the book, the Jews, the scholars clearly, they said to him that this Sefer was done by a great Chacham, by Chacham Echad. And it's very deep, and we don't understand it. So the king said, is there no Jew on earth that understands this book? Being that the Jews are then, at the time, he says, so they said, yes, in the Medina of what's called here Toledo, in Toledo, Spain. So the king sent these manuscripts to those people. And when the Chachmei of Toledo saw it, they rejoiced with great joy, and they sent the king many gifts. And from there it was revealed again, Misparsim was publicized Kabbalah Yisrael. He says that's what he found. He says another Sefer Mitzaref L'Chachmei writes, that he heard from Chachmei Emes, from Agidei Emes, that the year Shin Pei. Shin Pei would be, what year would be in Shin Pei? 5380, so that would be 1720. That in the year 1720, listen to this is another interesting detail. When the Spanish conquistadors pillaged Heidelberg, they took with them several thousand books, among them holy books on parchment, including the Zohar. And that's where it got out. Then he goes on to talk about those that the detractors, and says, even those that say the Zohar is not a tribute to Rashbi, he says he's Melamed Zchus because they saw how the Zohar is being misused by some, so they wanted to, so to speak, disassociate it from them. But they didn't mean to say that Zohar is not coming from Rashbi. So I misspoke when I said that they were found in two caves, in Cremona and in Mantoba. That's what I wanted to say, and I should have said clearly. They were found in these different descriptions the Chida gives, but there were two different versions. And in Mantoba they printed one version. In Mantoba they printed it. The first version was printed, the Zohar first print was in 5318, Shin Yud Ches, equivalent to the year 1658. That from there was later printed in Constantinople, which is called Fus Kushta, in 5496, 1713-6. And simultaneously in the same year, Tov Shin Yud Ches, of 1658, in those years, was printed a second Zohar Gadol. It's called a Zohar Gadol because it's bigger, physically bigger size. And from there it was later printed in Lublin in 1723 and 24. So I misspoke when I said that it was discovered in the caves in these places. No, that's where they were published, in each place. But the two different respective manuscripts were found. One is Zohar Gadol and one is the regular Zohar, the one that we use. Now there's a longer history to it. Let me just give you a few sources. The history to it goes like this. You can find more about this. Rabbi Menachem Kasher wrote a very powerful essay about this in Sinai, many years ago. I'm just looking if I have a source to give you. I don't really have one. The Radal, Rab David Luria, wrote a sefer called Kadmus HaZohar. The Zohar is so-called, its originality from the earlier generations. And then there's an excellent series of articles, Authenticity of the Zohar, online. You can look it up, by Rabbi Moshe Miller. They bring all those that felt the Zohar was not from Rashbi and refute it in a very powerful way. So really the record should be clear that it comes from Rashbi. This doesn't mean everything was written then. Things were added like in Torah Sheba'al Peh. Things could be added. But it originates from that time and it was known. And those that knew Kabbalah were able to recognize when these manuscripts began being discovered. Okay. One more thing, one more follow-up, which is Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students. Hello, Rabbi. I'd just like to comment on your answer in your most recent broadcast, 362, last week, to the question if Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students is rounded or an actual number. So here's what this fellow writes. Writes like this. In Likutei Sichos, volume 32, pages 149 to 153, the Rebbe states that Rabbi Akiva students received the punishment for their sin upon reaching the number of 24,000. Seemingly, then, this implies that there was, for certain, at least 24,000 students. I'm not sure why we need that. I think it's clear from the Gemara. It is worth noting that in footnote 24 there in Likutei Sichos, the Rebbe quotes contrasting versions. B'reish Yesher Abba And Kehelis rabbis say 12,000 students. Tanchuma says 300. Nedarim says 24,000 pairs, meaning 48,000 students. Yours truly. Okay, there are different versions, and I think it complements a bit of what we spoke about. So thank you for that. Let me see, what else do we have? So now, we're going to go to the Chassidus question. Apropos to our time, what does Chassidus contribute to the understanding of Mattan Torah? So I'll point out a few key things. We all know Mattan Torah, of course, was an event for Klal Yisrael. All the Eden were there. So it's long before Chassidus came around. Mattan Torah was an event that changed everything. In the words of the Rambam, Mattan Torah established a name of Rav Elazar, the Maseda of Torah, given, everybody saw it. And this would be the foundation of our Torah, of our mandate. There are many, many Chazal and Medrashim say what happened to Mattan Torah. The Jews became a nation. They became a tzuva v'esa. Now they're commanded to fulfill. And other things that Mattan Torah accomplished. You have Medrashim, you have stories, you have parables, especially Masechta Shabbos. The third month, the nation of three received the Torah of three. What fundamentally changed, we say in Medrash, that at the time there was no echo, the birds did not chirp, it was quiet. And when the non-Jews came running to Kerach and they said, what's going on? He said, Hashem eiz la'ame yite, Hashem yivarach es ame v'shalom. Hashem is giving his strength, his power to his nation. He's blessing them with peace. And I can go on and on. What Chassidus adds, Primus Atera adds, is a dimension that takes it to a completely different level. You can learn it very technically almost. Mattan Torah, I mentioned before, Jews became converts. Mattan Torah, they became officially Mitzuva v'Esa. They're no longer children. This is like their bar mitzvah. Now they are mechuyev mitzvahs. You could say this is when it became a formal nation. Torah is now incumbent on each one. Not like before Mattan Torah, which ain't a mitzvah v'Esa. You didn't have to. And there are halachic implications. There are many, many articles and essays and palpulim written about what Mattan Torah accomplished. What Primus Torah adds is a cosmic dimension and a personal dimension. Citing the Medrash, that before Mattan Torah there was a gzeira, tarte mashma. A gzeira meant a decree and also a split between what? Elyenim and tachtenim, the spiritual and the material. There was a schism that said, Elyenim la yardu lamata, this was what's above, the spiritual, spirit should not come down below, and this was with that which is below should not go up. And that was bit like gzeira. And they joined that now, not just Shemaim la Hashem, and Oretz Nasan Libnei Adam, but you can take a physical object and transform it to a chefzer shel kedusha. Mind you, this is not just Chassidus says this. This is also language you have, especially in Achreinim. But Chassidus gives a whole different geschmack in it. That before Mattan Torah, because it was not commanded, the Ovis could achieve great things, but only to Sheidash HaNivraim. They could elevate the world and realign it to the way God wanted it to be. But transformation, to take a physical object and turn it into a holy object forever and ever, only after Mattan Torah. Before Mattan Torah, that's why Avram Avinu used Simno Yotcha Tachas Shirechi. He told Elazar, put your hand below my gartel, basically, Tachas Shirechi, below my thighs, because that was the only mitzvah that was a chafza shel kedusha, milah, bris milah. Avram would never have done that, as the Rebbe explains, because it's not tzniizdik. But everything else was not saturated. It was a mitzvah done. The Gavra did it. Mattan Torah, you can take a hide from an animal and turn it into a parchment and sanctify it, and it becomes forever and ever a Sefer Torah, tefillin, mezuzah. The Beis Hamikdash stands where it is. Kedusha le'zazim came and never leaves. This is the chiddush of Mattan Torah. Matter and energy, matter and spirit became one. That the lowest of worlds connects to the highest. There's more that can be said about this as well. There's a sikha from Friedrich Rebbe. Someone asked the Friedrich Rebbe by a Suda, I think, Shavuos, what did Mattan Torah, what was it Machadish in Moshe Rabbeinu? He was already on a high level. So he says, it was Machadish that he began to appreciate Anoshim Pshutim, simple people. Again, Elyenim appreciating Tachtenim. And of course, Tachtenim appreciating Elyenim. In the Derech Tzachas, you could say E equals MC squared began by Mattan Torah. MC as in matter and energy. That you can take matter and turn it into energy, divine energy. And like he says in Tanya Perek Lamed Vav, by Mattan Torah, Mattan Torah is a taste of Mashiach. Mashiach will become Begoli, revealed how the world will become a dira b'tachtenim. The entire world will be a home for the divine. By Mattan Torah was me'enze, a taste of it. And the power was given to us to now achieve it. So Mattan Torah is a tremendous event. There'll never be Mattan Torah again. But Mattan Torah still has to be continued and consummated as we continue through the years from Mattan Torah till this day, continuing that work of refining and transforming the world and turning it into a Mishkan. Mattan Torah wasn't a Mishkan yet. As a matter of fact, Har Sinai, once they left, we don't even know where it is. Mishkan was built, and then the Beis HaMikdash became a permanent dwelling place for God. So Mattan Torah is a transformation, a revolution. And perhaps in a little more political terms, if I may, Mattan Torah also gave us the principles of civilization in a formal way. And by Hashem going to the nations of the world and asking them if they wanted Torah, even though at the time they said no, they weren't ready yet, but it was preparing the ground for a world that would be transformed by the principles of the Taryag Mitzvahs and the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Neach. Given why? Because it was given at Mattan Torah. Not just they do it because it's moral and ethical and rational, but it's given at Mattan Torah. So yet Mattan Torah becomes another thing. Anochi Hashem Elokecha becomes the foundation of everything. That if you don't have that foundation, that you answer to higher authority, then all the other mitzvahs, 10 Commandments, can be compromised. Look what happened with the Nazis in Nazi Germany. They became God in their own right. They decided, lo sitzach, accept certain people. So you can become your own God. There's a God above you, and that becomes part of who we are, and it has transformed the world. So in one word, Mattan Torah is the greatest revolution in history, setting the stage for all transformations, even for technology today, where the material world is not just cooperating, but a seamless channel to harness technology, to harness energy, and of course, by extension, to harness divinity and spirituality. So when the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea, that began by Mattan Torah, as he explains in chapter 36 and then 37 of Tanya. The Einze by Mattan Torah, Ata Reis Ladas, they had a taste, they saw it. And when Mashiach comes, it'll be a permanent fixture revealed to all forever and ever. Okay, now our custom is to do the essays, so let us do the essays. 3 new essays from 2019, they're Hebrew. The first one is במקום niskasher, אולי פשוט niskasher. Instead of connecting, let us just connect it with each other. It's a play of words, but he's talking about technology. Mushka Malka Dekel, age 18, Yokneam, Israel, student at the seminar in Beis Chana Tzfas. So it talks literally about technology today and how it's intruding in our lives. And starts bringing from the Frierdiker Rebbe and other places that we are losing our personal touch. Goes on and analyzes the modern times of why that's so. And how people connect for ulterior motives, not necessarily for the real reason. 3 so-called excuses for this depersonalization. And then goes on and says, Chassidus comes and says the whole real reason for relationship is to connect. Elam chesed yibona. And goes on to explain how the whole technology and all the modern times and everything is really steps toward being able to transform personal relationships, enhance them in new and unprecedented ways. Very well done. This and all other essays can be seen at chassidusapply.com. Next one. The next essay is Dachaf mul Dachak. Dachaf, to push instead of to be pressured. Orya Maimon, age 21, Yokneam, Illit in Israel, student in Miklalat Shanan Haifa, in Haifa. This one is, of course, about pressure. And how people always feel that pressure is not a good thing. Talking about, however, healthy pressure versus unhealthy pressure. That's the theme of this essay. And discusses, analyzes, dissects the roots of pressure how it affects our lives. And then how the Alter Rebbe introduces his take on it, in Tanya, of course. How Amunah plays a tremendous role because it causes the antidote to counter fear. And then finally, the conclusion of how to translate it all into a practical model in our lives. Very, very good essay. Very well annotated as well. And finally, essay number 3, Teichecha melev lev Matzlicha. When you rebuke someone, heart to heart, that succeeds. Chana Esther Cohen, age 18, Ocean City, Maryland. She is a student in the seminar Beis Chana Tzfat. And the title says it all. The idea of being able to, yes, help someone grow, but it's coming from your heart, and as opposed to from your mind, not just preaching and condescension. Okay. And goes on to talk about real case scenarios and how Chassidus adds that element of melev lev, heart to heart. Yeah, very well done essay as well. Just looking if I can sum up. Yeah, goes into specifics of different types of rebuke, healthy and unhealthy, and even by the Rabbeim, how they minimized it. And then even when there needs to be some rebuke, how to do that in a loving and kind way. Very good contribution to this whole dialogue. Excellent. So with that, we conclude this week's episode, the pre-Shavuos episode of My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 263. And I want to wish everyone, the words of the Frierdiker Rebbe, should have a Kabbalah Satera, besimcha ubeprimius. The Rebbe explains what that means, both besimcha with joy and primius internal. And it should be makabel Torah every year anew, in a new way, but most importantly, limud Torah, amanas lasis, to bring it down into action. As I mentioned, there will not be a program next week because of Shavuos, so the next program will be in 2 weeks from now. This has been My Life Chassidus Applied. Simon Jacobson, a guten Yontif, a guten Tamid, Simcha Kabbalah Satera, besimcha ubeprimius. Thank you.